was in central Illinois, and I was getting ready for the long trip home alone in my beat-up old Subaru wagon, going back to New England, alone. I had had a couple of friends ride out with me that I had dropped off in Ohio, and they'd shared expenses with me, but I was going back alone. They had other plans for their return trips. So my parents, knowing that as a struggling builder and contra dance musician, I didn't make very much. They took me to the service station and filled up my tank on their credit card, which was a symbol of prosperity that I didn't have in my life yet, and then gave me $50 in cash and said, "Is that enough?" Now, $50 was, it seemed to me, a lot of money. So I said, "Sure." And I started off on the road. The next day I wasn't so sure. After a few tankfuls of gas and spending the night at a cheap Motel 6 near Youngstown, Ohio. And after driving further on the next day, I found myself in the evening, as evening was falling, going into the city of Newburgh, New York, and going onto the bridge over the Hudson with 50 cents left in my pocket, a quarter tank of gas, my hammered dulcimer in the back seat because I planned to go directly up to Brattleboro for a New Year's Eve dance, and a queasy feeling in my stomach that I wasn't going to make it to Brattleboro and I might get stranded. So as I was crossing that bridge over the Hudson, I began to pray that somehow I would make it through all right. Well, the thought occurred to me that maybe I could set up as a street musician and play for change and make gas money enough to make the rest of the way home. Off down to my right, as I was coming off of the bridge, I saw a restaurant. It's the Diner 84 was a big sign on it. And I saw people lined up outside of it waiting for their New Year's Eve dinner. So I pulled off at the next exit and pulled up to the restaurant. And I went inside to tell the manager what my plight was and ask if I could entertain the people outside waiting to come inside for their meal. Well, he wouldn't have any of that. He said, "No, you can't do that here." Well, my heart fell, but I said, "Is there anywhere around here where I might do that?" And he said, "Oh, there's a Grand Union supermarket down the road." I had better luck there. The manager there just kind of laughed and said, "Sure, you can play outside our entrance." So I set up, I put out my case, put my few coins in as my seed money, made a little handwritten sign that said, "For gas money on the way home to Massachusetts. Thank you, Happy New Year." And then I started to play, with my fingers getting ever colder. Now, I was getting some coins, but mostly what I was getting was strange looks from the people coming in and out of the supermarket, until a couple of middle-aged men came out with bags of groceries in their arms, and they came closer to me when they heard my music. One of them actually took out a little pocket tape recorder and started recording my music. Well, I thought, I'll play the Irish Washerwoman for them. That's a familiar tune. As soon as I started playing that, they linked arms and started dancing around right there in front of the Grand Union. And one of them danced up to me and said, "Listen, we're going to a house party where the people would love your music. How much would you charge to come and play at that party?" And I said, "Well, I'm going somewhere tonight. I can't play for long, but how about $10 worth of gas for an hour of music?" Well, the deal was struck. And one of them got in my car, and I followed the other car to the gas station, put in $10 worth of gas in my tank, and then followed them to a residential neighborhood in front of a nice-looking split-level house. I followed them to the door, and the door opened, and the woman of the house greeted each of them with a hug and a kiss. And then as I came up, she gave me a hug and a kiss. I followed them downstairs into the recreation room, and where the man of the house, the husband, greeted us from behind the bar with a genuine Irish brogue. And then I got some idea of why they thought my music might be a hit there. Well, I quickly set up on a coffee table and sat on a couch to begin playing while they delightedly told everybody about their great idea and how they found me outside the supermarket. Well, it was hard to, I wanted to put in a good hour, but people were so friendly. They'd come, "Are you a vegetarian? I saw you didn't get any meat from the hors d'oeuvres." "My son's a vegetarian." And I said, "Oh, that's nice." And I'd keep playing. I had to keep my eyes on the instrument to know where I was. But after an hour's worth of playing, I stopped playing and I started to pack up, and I noticed that somebody had put a shot glass next to my dulcimer, and it had green money in it, paper money, and it ended up being more than $20 in tips. And so I said my goodbyes and my thanks, and I got back in my car for hours more of driving back to Massachusetts. And I realized that I was too tired and there wasn't enough time to drive up to Brattleboro. So it was a little bit before midnight that I made it back home to Haydenville. I came in and talked with my housemates for a while, and then happily went to my own bed. And I was amazed that I had made it through with the help of music and the kindness of some people that I'd met on my detour for New Year's Eve.
For sound effects. It's for sound effects. I'm not going to sit on it. It's my creative use of the stool. I'll just move it down a little. No, I'll just do it like this. And I know that I'm going to hit my limit, Gail. I know I'm going to hit my limit, but I timed it. It'll just take, okay. Starting at age 4, I developed a dog phobia. And you can imagine how complicated this might make my life when an important person who loved dogs came into my life. And especially since that person was my daughter, Amelia. Now, this incident that started the dog phobia happened almost 50 years ago, but I can still remember it clearly. I was 4, about yay high, and so was the dog, a black, tan German Shepherd. I was hiding behind the metal screen door, knocking on the door for my mom. I had just come home from preschool. But where was she? The dog was about 10, 15 feet away from me, tied to a tree. But I was panicked. He was barking at me. Where was my mother? She was usually here, but this time she wasn't. She did come back in a few minutes, but that was just enough time for a dog phobia to set in. And having that dog phobia, I encountered many interesting adventures. When I was in elementary school, every time I went to my friend's house, I rang the doorbell. I would hear the yippee-yappy barking of her dog, her small white poodle. But that was enough. The barking was enough to set off anxiety, and I could not go into her house until she locked that dog up in a room. And I remember another time when I visited my cousins in California. I was so excited to see them, but not so excited to see their dog, Lucky, a German Shepherd. And when I saw him running and barking, running over towards me and barking, I did the most logical thing I could. Jump up on my uncle's station wagon, climb to the roof, and stay there. That was the highest point, because that's where Lucky couldn't get to me. And luckily, he didn't. Well, having these experiences, I knew that I was not going to have any dogs, and I was not going to have any animals. No way. No way in my house. Well, fast forward 5 years later. Now I have a husband, I have 2 kids, Dylan and Amelia, and guess what? One of them loves dogs, loves animals. And did I tell you that my husband's father is a dog trainer and a dog breeder? Well, definitely those dog-loving genes, animal-loving genes came from that side of the family. And every time we went to Grandpa's and visited his, what I call dog farm, there were kennels upon kennels, open fields, and lots of dogs. And my daughter was just in her glory. She glowed when she played with the dogs, when she fed the dogs, bathed the dogs, frolicking in the green grass. But no, that was not what I stayed away from the dogs. I stayed indoors. And at 6, she announced that she was going to have a doggy daycare business. I said, okay, you can have your dogs when you're in your home, but this is my home, and in my household, we're not going to have any dogs. And but even though I didn't have any dogs in my home, I was okay with visiting dogs or animals that were behind the bars. They were in the cages, or they were in their containers. They were contained. So we would visit the Lupa Zoo. We would visit Look Park, and she would feed the deer and the goats. We would go to Petco and visit the animal supply store and the animals. And when she went in, she stepped in through the door of Petco and inhaled deeply. She said, "This must be what heaven smells like." Well, I took her to all these different places, hoping that would satisfy her animal interests. But you probably guessed that was not enough. She still wanted a pet. And she said, "Well, if I can't have a pet, Mom, how about a fish?" I thought, a fish. No barking. It's contained. Okay, I'll do a fish. 1 fish, then 2 fish, then 1 hamster, then 2 hamsters, then a leopard gecko, then a guinea pig, then another guinea pig. And I was hoping that these would satisfy her desires for a pet. As you can imagine, they didn't. No, she had her doggy posters, her doggy stuffed animals, her doggy blanket, but no dog. And I remember her saying to me, "It's not the same. Hugging a fish is not quite like hugging a dog. You can't really do that." And I remember her crying and wailing, tears streaming down her cheek at night. "Mom, why would God give me a mother that doesn't love dogs?" Oh, I knew that in my heart I had to somehow bridge this gap. Was there a way that I could find something that would meet her needs and my needs? Well, it was around that time I heard about the foster puppy program, where you can have a puppy for the weekend. You can pick the dog up on a Friday, drop the dog off on a Saturday. Bye-bye. And I liked that. And they took care of the vet costs. So for that Christmas of that year, when she was 10, I told her that she could have a foster dog, a service dog. She would train the service dog on the weekends, and the service dog would help other people. So we started to have doggy adventures. We would go to the hotel, the restaurants, the hockey games, and I learned that some dogs are really obedient, and some dogs really are quiet. And she didn't realize it, and I didn't realize it, but she helped me with the desensitization program for my dog phobia. Later on, though, I realized, so we're continuing to have doggy adventures, and now we have we're fostering a rescue dog named Philip, and he likes to have car rides in the morning with me, and this is kind of nice. I didn't really expect it. Now my kids are teenagers, and they don't really want to hang out with me, but here is a 4-legged creature that is happy to see me, and that is happy to ride in the car with me. And I even have to spell, because he understands the word go. So whenever I say, "Let's go," but if I don't mean to take him, he'll be so disappointed. So I have to spell around this dog. And what I've realized is that never say never. You just don't know the kind of journey that your children will take you on, and the unexpected detours that you may enjoy along the way. Thank you. And by the way, Philip is up for adoption.
Hi, everyone. So, one of the most common questions I get as a mother of 5 is, "Did you plan on having that many kids?" And it's an interesting question, and the answer is no. No, I did not expect to have this many kids. actually always planned on having 3 kids. I grew up in a family of 3, and my brother, my sister, and I would talk about how all 3 of us were then going to have 3 kids. It was pretty simplistic, but it was a happy thought. Time goes on, we grow up, and plans change. My brother had 2 kids and decided that financially that was enough for them. I had 3 kids and was doing fine with that, but my sister wasn't able to have kids for a very long time. So as I kept having child after child, it was always in comparison to my sister, who was so happy for me but so sad for herself. And then a huge change came into our life when our brother died. And in a way that planning, you plan so diligently for things, one of the first things that popped into my head is, there goes our plan for 3 kids each. And I know that sounds kind of crass, but that was one of the things that you examine, what you thought would happen and what actually happened. So when we were burying my brother, my sister came up, told me afterwards that she asked him if there was anything at all he could do so she could finally have a kid, to please do it. My brother died on August 14th in 2007. That Thanksgiving, we were met with my sister, very joyful, telling us that she had become pregnant and that she was going to have a child. This is a point in our family where we were as broken as could be, and to imagine that a baby was coming into our lives amid such loss was so exciting. Now, I never planned on losing my brother, neither did any of us, and I never planned on how healing after that would go. For my mom, healing meant taking my family to a surprise trip to Walt Disney World so she could just enjoy her grandchildren playing and doing fun things to take her mind off of losing her son. So that Christmas, just a month after Thanksgiving, we went ahead and went to Disney. So it was one of those trips where we all had the armbands and a meal plan included, and finally my parents said, you know what, Tam and Gabe, why don't you just go ahead and go out to dinner? We've got this. Well, what they had were my 3 children, aged 1, 3, and 5, and they stayed in the hotel room for the night while we had our night out. As we were going to the restaurant, and it was a themed restaurant in the Walt Disney world, Gabe and I looked at each other, and this was often our joke. So who's gonna drink tonight? Because one would have to drive. And I was always the designated driver because I seemed to always be pregnant. And I started out going, well, it looks like my chance. And then all of a sudden we both did the math and we thought, no. Well, let me tell you, nobody goes to Walt Disney World expecting to take a pregnancy test. So we had to leave Walt Disney World and go out into the Orlando. I came back, went to the restroom at the restaurant. It was very dim lighting, took the pregnancy test, came out to the sink, and all of a sudden I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm pregnant. I remember a woman came into the restaurant with her child, and I asked her, can you confirm what this says? And she said to her child, oh, she's gonna be a mommy just like me. And I was like, I am a mom. And it was really one of those, this was really not our plan. So I'll never forget going back to the hotel room that night. My parents were there looking pretty tired and happy, but you could tell my 3 had given them a run for their money. And so I said, so we have some unexpected news I want to tell you. And my mom was a very joyous person, so she said, what's your news? And I said, turns out we're having another baby too. And I'll never forget, my mom just went, and it finally took my father taking over and saying congratulations, and we moved on. And then we had to go through all the rituals you do when someone is pregnant for my sister, who was experiencing her very first time of being pregnant. And then I'd lug along behind her just as pregnant. But it was interesting because we never planned never planned to lose my brother, and that was a bigger unplanned than I would have ever imagined. And I never planned to have Joe, but what a joy he's been in our lives. So, 2008, my sister and I are both pregnant, and we're both about to have these two babies. And we're going through everything that you would go through. It was very fun to share a pregnancy with my sister. It was also a little awkward. I felt like I was raining on her parade, and just in that unplanning that happens. Like I told you before, my brother had died on August 14th, 2007. It was such a gift that my niece Sarah was born on July 28th, 2008, sorry. And my Joe was born on August 28th, 2008. Both of them perfectly cradle that anniversary. And so I never planned on Joe, but I never thought that the symmetry of Joe and Sarah both being able to help our family through the most difficult months would become our plan. And that has been our plan every summer since. We celebrate these two babies like you would not believe. So I never planned to have that many kids, but I would certainly never change it. So thank you.
So there I was, and here I am. So there I was, sitting in a wheelchair, drinking apple juice. I was 63 years old, and I'd just had my 10-year colonoscopy. The doctor came out and said, "You have a tumor, and it's probably malignant." Well, up to then, this had been my life. And 30 seconds later, it was a whole different life. Now, I loved my life. I have a long-term relationship. I live in the Hilltowns with my family. I have 2 grown children and probably a half a dozen other children to whom I did not give birth. I'm part of a very large community that is both my social and spiritual life. And 13 years in to a job that I loved. However, I'd been kind of thinking and talking with my boss, could I maybe half retire at 66? There were things I wanted to do. I couldn't afford to fully retire. And I knew that whether it was aging or illness or dying, me or someone close to me, that you put things off, you wait to do them, and sometimes they're not going to happen. So I had some chemotherapy, I had some radiation, the gift that keeps on giving, and 6 months later I went in for what should have been a very straightforward operation. Take out the tumor, give me an ileostomy, 4 or 5 days in the hospital, a couple of weeks at home. They tell me I came through the surgery really well, that I walked and talked and drank more apple juice. And then I wasn't okay. I was incoherent. I was running fevers. They were running tests, and then they had to operate again. And they were fishing all kinds of bits and pieces out of me and putting all kinds of packaging and tubing in me. 2 months in the hospital. First I had pneumonia, then I had a virus, then I had another virus, then I got MRSA, then I got shingles, and then I got a cold sore. Like, will no virus leave me untouched? I almost died. I don't remember that either, but that's what they tell me. 2 months after that, I got out of rehab. So 4 months total. And I came home. And I was scared and depressed and anxious and 64 now. And it was like, what's going to happen to me? How long will it take me to heal? What's this 3rd chapter of my life going to be like? That was some pretty scary questions. Now, you might be getting to the point where you're saying, it's silver lining time, right? Where's the, hello, silver lining? Of course there's a silver lining. I am alive. Doesn't get much more silver than that. However, I went into the hospital at 260 pounds. I was a radical fat girl, I have to say. 260 pounds, I came out 80 pounds lighter. My type 2 diabetes was gone. My cholesterol was normal. My blood pressure was normal. My sleep apnea went away. I would have rather have gone to Weight Watchers, but, you know. And I truly believe that the 400 pictures of sunflowers that got posted to the Sunflowers for Sue page with good wishes and prayers is one of the things that kept me alive. So I'm home recovering. I got the rejection letter from disability on my 65th birthday, 19 months with no income. Thank God for families. However, now I'm retired. I have time to take a QuickBooks class so I can do bookkeeping and earn some money. I have time to do tarot readings and teach, to do storytelling, to read and listen to all the books I ever wanted to. I've managed to go on vacation. I'm in a pretty good place. It's a pretty good life. So here I am. I'm retired. Now, I will never be who I was in 2014. I will be better. Now, if only I could find shoes to match my bag.
What a delight to be here. Detours can take us to some very unexpected places and to very unusual experiences. Many, many years ago, when I was young, so that's many, many years ago, I was backpacking through Europe with two other friends, and we found ourselves on a train in France. And I don't know whether it was our weariness or our confusion or the late hour of night, but somehow we managed to get off at the wrong station. And it was like you hear in the movies, it was a dark, dark, stormy night. So as we moved out and were enveloped by the darkness, somehow that wind and rain just pushed us forward until we came to a building that luckily had Youth Hostel Association on it. And we were grateful that our knocks on the door were responded to, and we were welcomed into a warm, safe haven for weary travellers. Now, the warden didn't speak English and we didn't speak French, but that was okay. He showed us upstairs, along a corridor and into the women's dormitory. A very, very big space, plenty of bunk beds to choose from, and we were the only girls there. We got out a map, found where we were, had a look at the train schedule, and knew that we had to be up before 5 in the morning to make the connection to get back on track. So, eagerly, we fell into the comforting arms of sleep. That was until just after 1 a.m. in the morning, when I was rudely awakened by my friends shaking me, Christine, wake up, we're scared. And I said, why? And they said, someone's been coming in, putting their hand in through the door and switching the lights on and off, and we're scared. And I said, don't be too scared. No, we're really scared. I said, look, if anyone comes back, I will take care of them. So I got out of bed and I sat on the edge of the bed, and in my hand I had a collapsible umbrella. So I'm waiting and I'm half wanting, half expecting that they will come back. I didn't have to wait too long. the door handle turned, the door edged open, and a shaft of light from the hallway just slipped in through the door. And a hand came through, but it didn't switch the light on or off. Instead, there was a long shaft, and at the end, it kind of fanned out, and it was a flashlight. And there was a thin beam of light, and it came in. As the arm came in, I saw it was attached to the body of a teenage boy. And as he crept in, 3 other boys crept in behind him, and all they were dressed in were their underpants. My girls' friends are shaking in their bed, and I can see the flashlight looking. And as they advanced, all of a sudden, I leapt off my bed. Out! 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 I yelled. Well, the 3 that were behind got so frightened that they scuttled out the door, down the hallway, and into the safety of the boys' dormitory. But the one with the flashlight, somehow I must have startled into action, because then he advanced at me and started going, whack, 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 whack. And I'm there, so I've got my little umbrella, so I'm going, whack, 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 whack. And so it was like, umbrella, 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 and torch. And next thing you know, I edged him towards the door, and then the unexpected happened. The whole head of my umbrella detached and flew off like a missile. Down past his head, down, out the door, down the hallway, and landed with a thud, thud, and then bang, as it crashed into a terracotta pot. Well, that man, I think, didn't know what had hit him. So all of a sudden, he rapidly retreated, running down the hallway into the boys' dormitory. The 3 of us, shaken, got up, went out, down the stairs, banging on the door of the warden. Remember, no French. I'd learnt a little at school. So I'm yelling out, Garçon! Garçon dans la chambre! Garçon dans la chambre! Boy in the room! So the man comes out, wipes his weary eyes, takes us back upstairs. I retrieve the head of my umbrella and stick it back on its little stick. We go into our room. He goes to talk to the boys. We get a chair and put it underneath the door handle to make sure that we're secure for the rest of the night. We didn't get much sleep. We got up just before 5. Never saw those boys again. But as we left and we opened the door, we realised that we had been detourists from out of the dark. But into the new day, there on the horizon was the sun, just coming up, promising new adventures, new excitement for 3 travellers. But I learnt something from that experience. As a tourist or a detourist, I never, ever travel without my handy, collapsible umbrella. And it's right there in my bag. Thank you.
Hello. I will begin on a Friday. I was 16 years old, and I was very in love. My boyfriend Tim and I hadn't been together for very long, but we already had plans for what we were going to do after high school, who was going to go to college first, and maybe even what we might name our children. And earlier in the day, he had caught me in the hallway in school and said, "I need to talk to you. It's important. Meet me in the parking lot after school." So I waited for him in the parking lot, and as he came out, I went to go greet him with a hug and a kiss, and he stopped me, and he apologized to me and said that he felt like he would hold me back from fulfilling my potential, and he broke up with me and left. All weekend long, he didn't respond to my phone calls, and I worked on what I would say when I saw him again. On Monday, I knew on my way to homeroom, his locker would be around the corner, down the hall to the right. He wouldn't be able to keep from talking to me. He wouldn't be able to avoid me. By Monday, I knew just what I was going to say and just how it would go, and we would be happy again together. And I turned that corner, and I walked down the hall towards his locker, And I didn't see Tim there. I saw instead our friend John. And I said, "Hey, John, have you seen Tim? I have to talk to him." And when John turned around, his skin was pale, almost green, and his eyes were red. And he said, "Oh, God, nobody called you?" Tim had just turned 18. He took his life that weekend, and he wanted to be a history teacher. We were going to name our son Michael. That path became closed to me, and so I took a detour. A couple of years later, I was on my way back to my room in Scott Barracks. 4 rooms to a floor in a square, 4 floors. And as a fresh plebe, mine was on the top floor. And moving about the hallways, plebes were expected to have their shoulders 90 degrees, square to the walls, and head and eyes straight forward. As I ascended the second set of stairs, I heard footsteps behind me, but with head and eyes forward, I never could have seen it coming. A green girl, that's that scratchy green blanket that all the soldiers sleep with, was thrown over my head. And when I woke up in the hospital 3 days later, everything hurt. The only other people that would have been in Scott Barracks were members of my own company. And that path became closed to me, and I took a detour. I've taken a lot more detours on my path to be right here, right now, today. And I'm not telling you these pieces of my story because I want sympathy. I don't want it. I don't need it. I don't want you to feel badly about these things. I want you to take a moment. And if you feel unloved or alone, to have faith. Love is as perennial as the grasses. And if you feel weak, hopeless, and broken, to have courage. The human spirit is resilient, and we are not weak creatures. And if you feel alienated and lost, please take a look around and have hope. Because wherever life takes you, your path is right in front of you. Thank you.
On my second day at the ashram, I began to plot my escape. This wasn't the way I had expected it to turn out. I had gone to India in search of spiritual refreshment. And I had chosen this particular ashram because its guru was known to be especially warm and jolly. But when I reached the ashram, I discovered that the guru would not be my teacher. He was on an extended tour of Western Europe. Instead, our teacher, who sat in the edge of our classroom, was an older lady, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, with a slightly disgruntled look on her face, a plain, white, unadorned sari, and her minions, younger devotees, clustered around her, hanging on her every word. It was clear that she was a very important person, and it was also clear that she was neither warm nor particularly jolly. Well, White Sari Lady led our class in 2 long sessions of meditation and breathing work. And then at the end of the day, she told us that the next day we would be initiated into a special exalted breathing technique that the guru had perfected and pioneered to take us to a new level in our meditation. But first, there would be satsang at 7 p.m., or hymn singing, and we were all expected to attend. And to prepare ourselves for our initiation, there would be a 5 a.m. yoga class. Well, I showed up for satsang as expected, and when I entered the prayer hall, it was very hot and noisy and crowded, so I stayed just long enough for White Sari Lady to notice that I was there. And then I slipped out to have a walk. But I was followed by one of the minions, a young woman who stuck to me like glue, and it was very obvious that I was not going to be walking around the ashram on my own that evening. I suddenly got a terrible headache and asked her to walk me to my room. Went to bed early, and I did not set the alarm. Well, the next morning at 5:10, there was a terrible banging on my door. And I heard a voice. It was the minion. She said, "You must come now. Madam is asking for you. The yoga class has begun." Well, there was no way I was going to that yoga class. I needed an excuse, and I needed it now, and it had to be airtight. I suddenly had an inspiration. I said weakly, "But I can't come now. I have diarrhea." The minion left. Later, I showed up for our initiation session, and it was clear that White Sari Lady had not bought my excuse. She sent me a poisonous look of Indian stink eye. Then we began our initiation. White Sari Lady counted our breaths, had us breathing slowly in the beginning, and then little by little she sped up our breathing until we were breathing rapidly like this. And we continued panting like that, for it seemed like forever. And when it was over, White Sari Lady asked us expectantly, "How did you feel?" And one of my classmates stood up and said, "It was amazing. My scalp felt like it was on fire. My fingers and toes tingled. I could see stars in front of my eyes." And that's when I couldn't take it anymore. I jumped up and I said, "Of course you're feeling like that. You were hyperventilating. We were all hyperventilating." White Sari Lady was so nonplussed that she could only flap her mouth up and down. But regaining her composure, she paired us off, and when we all had a partner, she told us that the next day we would each be giving our partner a special gift in a spirit of humanity and friendship. And to make our lives easier, there was a lovely gift shop on the other side of the ashram that had many artifacts of the Guru, and she knew we would spend generously for our partners and ourselves and our loved ones at home. Well, I knew I had to leave. I wasn't going to be finding spiritual refreshment in this place. But how? As I walked back to my room to wash up for lunch, I noticed an auto rickshaw idling at the edge of the compound. I grabbed a 500 rupee note out of my pocket and ran to the auto rickshaw, waved it in the face of the driver and said, "Bangalore, 2 o'clock, yes?" He said, "No problem, madam, no problem." So I flew back to my room, threw everything I had in my little suitcase, and at the dot of 2 o'clock, when White Sari Lady and all her minions would be in the classroom, I ran back to the auto rickshaw, jumped in with my baggage, and said to the driver, "Jaldi jao," which means go fast. We peeled out of there in a cloud of diesel fume and dust, and we were soon tooling along a back road at the auto rickshaw's maximum speed of 40 miles an hour. I could feel the wind in my hair. I felt free, incredibly free, and in fact, at that moment, I felt more spiritually refreshed than I have felt in a very long time.
Back in 2011, I went to my 30th high school reunion. Now, if you've been to a high school reunion, you know that it's a time of great excitement, great mystery. Who is that guy? He had hair when I knew him all those years ago. I had a wonderful time. And as I was walking out, I hear this voice. "Aren't you going to say hello?" I turn and I look, and I see this tiny woman with long blonde hair flowing down her back. And I'm thinking, I have no idea who this is. And so very politely, as I'd been doing all evening, I said, "I'm sorry, I'm not recognizing you." And she flung her arms around me, this enormous bear hug. She said, "It's me! Donna Collins!" And I'm thinking, she really doesn't remember. Because we had had some close encounters freshman year and sophomore year, and not one of them had led me to believe that this had been in our future. Because what I remember in 9th grade was her sitting in front, excuse me, turning around as I raised my hand answering every question I could possibly answer, and saying, "Do we have homework tonight?" So this is the person who I know all year. And there was one snowy day where our teacher decided it was too snowy for him to come to school. But in northern New Jersey in the 70s, you don't take the day off for school. We're all walking to school. And so there we were sitting in our English class with the snow piling up on the windows. And those are those old buildings where you can raise the windows. And we did our busy work because the teacher, he decided, as I said, I did say yes. He decided he was staying home. Sub had given out our busy work. We had done it. Kids are wandering around the classroom. They're talking, they're laughing. And I'm, of course, doing what I do best when I'm done with my work is I've got my head bent over my notebook. I'm writing a story. And all of a sudden, down my back, there's this icy coldness. And I look up, and there's Donna laughing. And I have had it. I reach down my shirt, I grab what's left of that snowball, and I fling it, and it just goes all over, because I'm no athlete. And I get up, and I'm wearing what in 1977, 78, are snow boots, my cowboy boots, with the wooden heels. I've leaped up out of my seat, I'm facing her, and I start walking towards her with these wooden heels clonking on the floor. The whole class goes silent. The sub at this point, I think, is thinking that maybe she should jump out the window. I get Donna all the way up to the blackboard. I grab her by the front of her shirt, lean in, and come up with the best comeback line ever. "I've never done anything to you, leave me alone." I storm back to my seat, drop down in it. The bell rings, and the entire class flees out the door, followed by the substitute teacher. Now, about a year later, I'm walking home from school with my friend. We're carrying our books, laughing and joking, and there's Donna and her friends hanging out on the playground, hanging out on the bridge right behind the high school. And they're like, their idea of a good time on the after school, beat her up. Beat her up. So they've got Donna in a hard place. And I'm standing there. I'm just standing in my books, staring at her. Beat her up. Beat her up. She finally turned, shrugged, and said, next time. 30 years later, here she is with her arms wrapped around me as if I am the best friend she had in high school. And I pushed back a little bit, and I said, "You don't remember." Oh my God, what did I do? I was such a brat. Well, she stood there telling me all these things that had happened to her and how hard it was for her to go to to come to high school. And I'm actually thinking, and I'm thinking even further back than Donna. I'm thinking to third grade, Stephen Rella, who had made my life a living nightmare for the first 4 months of school. And now it's Christmas. And in northern New Jersey, you have a Christmas tree, you have Christmas cards, and he walks up to me with this card. And I open it up, and there's this bright pink background and an enormous poinsettia. And he looks at me and he says, "I gave you the best card I had." And I'm standing there with Donna's arms around me, thinking of Donna, thinking of Stephen, thinking of all my friends and enemies, and I don't know who's who. Thank you.
Okay, some great stories. I gotta say, I'm a little nervous. Just a minute. Much better. Do you guys feel okay? Good. So this is about detours, and I'm an author, a teacher, and an artist. but my detour is that I also consider myself to be a helper. And unfortunately, that's not a title that everybody agrees with. In particular, my family, who experienced some of my help, which was unrequested. You know, I'm a helper when there's nobody saying, could you help me with this? You know, sometime I should take a clue from that, but I can't help myself. So, for example, my wife, this is quite a while ago, well, it's a family thing. So we have mouthwash. And my view is that mouthwash is too strong. And plus, you can make it go further if you add a good amount of water to it. And so I was in the habit of diluting the mouthwash. And my then wife Linda, after I'd been in the bathroom and I'd done this, and I was going down the hall and I heard her go, "God damn it!" Yeah. I said, "Oh, maybe." She said, and came out and she said, "Did you do this?" And I said, "What?" She said, "The mouthwash? Is this you?" And I said, "Yeah, because it'll go farther and it doesn't taste." She said, "I can't believe it." And I said, "Okay, well, just, you know, I've got the rest and I'll get you another bottle. You know, we can do that." But in the family, this became a kind of a habit. Whenever I had the opportunity to help somebody, I would take it. Quite a few years ago, but my in-laws were staying with us, and my father-in-law, Howard, is an engineer and designed actually an electric bus that was looking to be pretty successful. And so they were saying this was a bus project in Boston. And so one afternoon I'm sitting in the living room and Howard is going upstairs and I'm reading something and then I hear him slip and tripped on a stair tread. And so, you know, I dropped the book and he had slipped and bumped his knee very hard into the oak stair tread. And I said, "Howard, are you okay?" And he's typical of Howard. Even though he was 75 at the time, he was fine. And I said, "Wow, that, you know, you really took a fall there." And he said, "No, I'll be fine." And of course, he gets up, grabs the railing, and starts going up the stairs like this. And I said, "Howard, you really, it doesn't look like you're fine." And he said, "I'll be fine, I'm okay." And I said, "Well, okay." He said, you probably should go get that seen." And he said, No, I don't have time to do that. I've got a big meeting in the morning. So come the next morning, about 7 a.m., I'm also sitting in the living room again, and Linda's making some oatmeal, and my son Corey is also there. He's also been helped by me on several occasions. And so Howard's coming downstairs, and I said, "Howard, how's the knee this morning?" And he said, "It's, you know, a little swollen and red, but I got to get to this meeting, so I have to go." And I said, "Okay." And so he left, and I got my cell phone out, and this is a warning to Linda, you know, that I'm about to do something. And she said, what are you? And I said, I'm just going to call one of those doctors, you know, and see what they say. So I got a nurse on the phone, and she said, hello, so how can I help you? And I said, well, the other day I was going upstairs and I slipped on the stair tread and I bumped my knee on the stair tread. At this point, Linda's looking at me like, and so the nurse on the phone saying, well, I'm sorry to hear that. What exactly happened? Do you think you broke anything? And I said, no, it's a little red. I'm repeating exactly what Howard said. It's a little red and it's getting a little swollen. But you know, having a little bit of a hard time walking around. And she said, okay. Well, it's kind of hard to know what to tell you over the phone. I think you should probably come in, which was the answer I wanted to hear. You should come in and have it looked at. And she said, what's your name? And I said, Howard Ross. And again, Linda's going like, I'm going, and she said, okay, so Mr. Ross, when were you born? And I literally said, I don't know. And she said, Mr. Ross, did you hit your head? And I basically said, you know, I think I'd better call you back. And at this point, my son, Corey, is rolling around on the floor with belly laugh. My wife has left the room. And it's another prime example that I'm reminded of often when I was a helper. My advice, if you're a helper too, is always know when the person you're helping was born.